All right, class. This is Chapter 8, Managing Human Resources and Labor Relations. These are the 10 learning outcomes from the chapter. Please review the learning outcomes and the section in each chapter of the textbook. This is an exhibit on human resources. What are some of the goals and strategies to market position? And then based on that, you have a job analysis design and forecasting with employee recruitment and employee selection. Then you have to train and develop the employees and performance and planning evaluations and compensation and benefits. As you form your small business, you want to have a package for the employees in terms of what are their benefits, how much are you going to pay, what are some of the evaluation matrix that you're going to use to determine whether that employee is meeting the minimum standard and requirements or they're not meeting the standard and requirements. And you want to also look into your statistics in terms of retention and turnover. What that basically means is how often do employees come work for you and then leave, right? That is the retention and that is the turnover rate. Retention is keeping your employees happy and how long they stay. You may want to keep a track of that in your organization. This is an example of a job description where it talks about what the job summary is, what it entails, and what are some of the duties that come with that job. Now, as an entrepreneur and you're starting out in the business, you're probably going to have to write this stuff yourself when you're having advertisements to try to recruit people to work for your organization, especially when you're a startup company. But over time, you may want to hire, again, in my previous videos, I said, hire a human resource professional that could do write job descriptions and duties and specifications, and to reach out to advertisement to kind of select the best candidate based on the job description. And of course, when you're reviewing and collecting resumes. This is another chart, right? When it comes to human resource planning and process, what does it take? And here's some concept checks in terms of the questions and learning objectives to consider when you're reading the textbook and chapter outlines in PowerPoint. This is a good video that we should see about human resource planning.
Well, in this short video, we're going to talk about the planning function that's involved in human resource management. And planning, as we all know, refers to generally figuring out ultimately where we're trying to go, where we're trying to end up, and developing a course of action for ultimately how to get there. And so planning for human resources looks very specific, maybe different than some of the other planning functions involved in management. When human resource planning, we're referring specifically to employees and how do we plan and anticipate the needs of the organization, but also fulfill those particular needs when they arise. And so there's a number of different stages or steps that we utilize in human resource planning. The first thing that we're going to do is we're going to engage in and complete what's called a job analysis. Before we can figure out ultimately who we need to hire, we have to figure out what are we hiring for? And that's really what a job analysis entails. We're actually trying to get detailed information about the jobs in our organization. We're trying to figure out ultimately, what are the requirements of the jobs? What are the tasks, the duties, the responsibilities? What kind of knowledge do applicants need to have to fulfill the responsibilities of the job and do the job very effectively? And so unless we do this, then we have no ability to really identify a qualified applicant in the workplace because we have no idea what we're trying to compare them to. And so the job analysis would be that first piece here. Typically things that are produced from a job analysis, and I kind of alluded to these and mentioned them before. First thing is we're going to produce a job description. And if you've applied for any type of open or vacant position before, you've probably seen a job description. Job descriptions outline what we refer to as the tasks, duties, as well as responsibilities of a particular job. We refer those as TDRs. So the tasks, ultimately, what are you going to be doing, your duties, and your responsibilities. So this serves a couple of different benefits. The first thing, from an employer side, if I outline the tasks, duties, and responsibilities, right, what the person is going to be doing during the course of their work, I now can determine what type of knowledge they need, what type of skills they need, as well as the abilities needed to perform the job effectively. Now, from the applicant side, say you're applying for a position, right? The job description is very helpful for you because it determines, or at least shows you, what you're going to be doing on a regular basis. And so this can help formulate, or you can formulate an opinion as to whether or not you feel like the job is going to be a good fit for you, because we all know things that we like and don't like, and we're probably going to try and stay away from those positions that incorporate tasks, duties, and responsibilities that we don't necessarily like. So that's the benefit there. And from an organizational side, you obviously want applicants applying for the job that feel like they're going to be a good fit, because the worst thing that can happen is to go through the entire, recruiting, the selection process, select somebody for the position, and then all of a sudden they don't like the job for whatever reason. And so a job description can help try and alleviate that to a certain degree, of course, although you can't eliminate it entirely. The next thing that you'll find that's produced by a job analysis is what we call a job specification. And a job specification produces a couple different things similar to a job description. It produces what we call knowledge, skills, and I'll write over here, abilities. Commonly referred to as KSAs in human resource circles. And so knowledge, skills, abilities. What we're trying to outline here are what are the knowledge, the skills, and the abilities that a qualified applicant should possess to perform this job effectively. And so this is good for a number of different reasons. Obviously, from an interviewer standpoint, if you're a screening type person where you're looking at resumes, you know exactly how to filter out certain applicants if they don't have the required knowledge, the required skills, and the required abilities. That's an important thing. But what this also does is it signals to the workforce what are the knowledge, skills, and abilities that you're looking for. And what you're trying to do from an organizational side is to weed out the people that don't meet the minimum qualifications. Now, you're truly never going to do this entirely, because you always have people that think, well, maybe I can kind of squeak through and no one will notice, right? And those people are always going to apply. But for the most part, if you establish, hey, such and such position requires a master's degree, 5 years of experience, yada, 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 you're very detailed. If someone sees that and they don't have those particular items, then they're probably less inclined to apply, because they don't really want to waste their time, and obviously you don't want them to waste your time as well. So that's the first part right there. Those are the things that we do in terms of getting together and determining the job analysis piece. The next thing that we're going to do is we need to actually do a little bit of forecasting. And specifically, we are going to forecast the labor supply as well as demand. And so what we're trying to do here is we're trying to anticipate the needs for our workforce, right? That's so the supply. Obviously the available workers that are in your particular area. And so we're going to look in a couple different ways. You can look internally, right? That's one opportunity. You can also look externally, so you can look outside the organization. Generally, organizations try and fill positions internally. First, there's a certain fit, right? You kind of know the employee, so you have a little bit more background about them. You know they fit into the organizational culture already, at least they should. So there are some benefits. It also serves as a motivating mechanism, because if employees know that you promote heavily from within, they're more inclined to try and apply for positions within your organization because they know that you promote more heavily from within rather than going for the outside and trying to find applicants. So that can be beneficial. But the problem therein lies if you don't have internal applicants that have the required or needed knowledge, skills, and abilities, then obviously you have to look outside the organization. There's no way that you can continue to try and attract employees internally if they don't have the required skill sets. And so you may have to look outside the organization. Now, there are a couple of tools that you can use to try and forecast labor supply and demand, or at least try and anticipate what supply is going to be like. You can use what we call skill inventories, and I'll write this down over here. A skill inventory is essentially a profile for each of the employees within the organization. And what that profile shows is it shows training that each employee's had. It shows, what type of educational background, previous work experience, positions that they've held, maybe aspirations, right? Future jobs they've identified that they're interested in. Really anything that's needed for you to make an assessment if the candidate actually could be a good fit. And these are really helpful. It's basically the equivalent of like a Facebook page, but it's internal to the organization, and they have many benefits. But from an organization side, I can do a quick search and maybe search for a certain skill or search for a certain educational background. And very quickly, I can see if anyone meets that criteria, and then I can contact them, maybe encourage them to apply. And that could be a little easier because I know they have the desired skill set. And so those are very, very beneficial. Another thing that employers use, what we refer to as replacement charts. And a replacement chart is a particular succession planning tool, and so we're trying to plan for replacing certain employees. And really what you do is you identify key positions in the organization, right? Positions that are identified as what we refer to as A positions, right? They're crucial for the success of the organization. And then what we do is we try and identify potential candidates to fulfill those roles eventually. And we identify, well, maybe this candidate could be a good fit for this position eventually. But what are the skills they need? How can we shape them and train them now so that ultimately when this person does retire, we have someone that we can immediately plug in and then can actually perform the job effectively. Now, we've obviously anticipated the supply of labor, right, internally and externally. Usually you try and go internally first because it's a little more minimal in terms of cost than obviously hiring recruiters or do advertising for certain positions and things. But as far as demand goes, how we anticipate demand is we look at past trends, right? Looking at past sales. We take a look if there's any additional variables with seasonality, and we look at economic conditions like the consumer confidence. We look at consumer spending, GDP, right? Those are things that we're going to look at to try and assess what demand is like. Now, once we've done that, then we're going to go on to the last particular stage of the human resource planning process, and that lie along with demand. And so what we need to do here is, now that we forecasted what demand is like, and we know what our labor supply is, we have to make sure that they're consistent with one another. And so this can involve a couple different scenarios. First situation is we're involved in a particular situation to which we have too much labor, right? We forecasted demand. We determined that based upon economic conditions and a few other variables that we know that spending is lower. And so we don't have a need for so many employees. And so we have to change the labor, the amount of labor that we have that's on our payroll, and we have to make it consistent with demand. So this a lot of times can involve things like layoffs, right? Removing employees. We saw a lot of that happen as a result of the recession that began in 2008, that many employees unfortunately lost their positions because a lot of organizations believed that the labor supply was excessive based upon their anticipated demand. And so they resorted to things like layoffs. You can also resort to, providing incentives for like early retirement. Instead of having to lay off employees, maybe contacting current employees that are already close in age to that retirement time and giving them incentives to retire, and then obviously not filling those positions, right? Kind of having a freeze on that particular position, right? Like attrition with a hiring freeze is very, very common because you're not necessarily reducing morale by eliminating employees, and then the survivors deal with the psychological effects of wondering if they're next. That can be very detrimental to productivity. Now, the other situation, and obviously more ideal, is you identify that you don't have enough labor and you need more employees because you anticipate more demand. In that case, we're going to get to the point to where we have to actually hire. We have to fill those roles. And fortunately, because we've done the job analysis, we figured out what the job description is, we've identified the job specification, we will be in a better position to actually recruit qualified applicants. So check back later on. I'm going to record an additional video that'll deal with specifically the recruitment process and then also with selection.
Okay. These are some questions to consider when it comes to human resources planning. Section 2, some concept checks. Now, this is a chart that talks about the steps in employee selection process. When it comes to the initial screening and application and interview, it looks at all the resumes and figure out what is a good fit, see if they meet the minimum standards and qualifications. Some companies and organizations have employment testing. And then based on those two requirements, they have a selection process for the interview. And if they pass that selection process for the interview, they do background and reference checks. Some companies may require a physical examination. And then sometimes there's a committee formed and to figure out whether they should hire this individual or not. Now, your organization, your small business, when you start, you might not have all of these screening processes because it takes time and money. You may be an employee of one person, right? Just to get this business off the ground. So you may have to be the human resource manager to the marketing director, to the financial planner and accountant, and the janitor, cleaning up after yourself in the office to keep it clean. So eventually over time, you may want to place policies and procedures and job descriptions of what would be an ideal candidate to work for your business, right? Big or small, just something to consider. And then this one, it gives you a good table about striking out at the interview game, right? Some of the things that questions may be asked and some responses. Some concept check for number 3, section 3, read through the textbook and the outlines. And let's take a look at an example of Zappos.
But first, you might know retailer Zappos for the shoes it sells and its emphasis on customer service. What you may not know about is its quirky corporate culture and why the company is banking on that for its long-term success. Our economics correspondent Paul Solomon reports as part of his weekly series Making Sense, which airs every Thursday.
Definitely the best porta potty experience I've ever had.
From its porta party PR to its campus in downtown Vegas, Zappos, the online shoemonger, is devoted to different.
Let me give you these 3 rules about wearing wallflowers, as we like to call them.
Wallflowers?
Wallflowers. As you see, we got the wall, and we call them wallflowers.
Front desk dress code enforcer Jason Brown gives visitors 3 options.
First one is to take it off if it holds sentimental value to you. The next one is to wear it around your head in a bandana, John Rambo style. And then the last one is to cut it and it becomes part of the collection.
Thankfully, my tie was deemed passably peculiar and thus spared a spot on the wall. Amidst decor both seasonal, lanterns for Chinese New Year, and long-standing, like the shoesaphone. Tony Hsieh took over Zappos 17 years ago after selling his online ad network, Link Exchange, to Microsoft for a cool $265 million.
What a lot of people actually don't know is the real reason why we ended up selling the company.
And that is?
Because the company culture just ended up going completely downhill. I myself dreaded getting out of bed in the morning to go to my own company.
History would not repeat itself, Shea vowed. So at Zappos, culture comes first. And that starts with hiring people who'll fit.
I remember coming in and one of the things was, we're not trying to hire based off of your education. We want to hire based off of someone I would want to go have a beer with after lunch.
Well, I would want to have a beer with you, and I barely know you.
Yeah, I wouldn't have a beer, we could have a shot.
Zappos' core values are an obsession. Embrace change, be humble, create fun and a little weirdness.
It's a family that loves to play.
Musician Tyler Williams heard it was harder to get into Zappos than Harvard. So to be more than a face in the crowd, he sent a video Valentine. And when it earned him an interview,
I think one of the craziest questions is they ask on a scale of 1 to 10, how weird are you? So I'm definitely a 10 on that scale, so I was worried I was a little too weird for Zappos.
Nope. Williams is now a fungineer, the brains behind company galas and other so-called experiences, like Tutu Tuesdays.
We, probably at the pinnacle of its popularity, we had 50, 60 people that would wear tutus on Tuesday.
Another core value, build a positive team and family spirit.
So we put these games on the elevator to hopefully, that was good, to hopefully get people to stop and play the game, have collisions, have conversations, and get off on the wrong floor. So people would visit different areas that they normally wouldn't.
Zappos invests lavishly in morale. Impress a colleague, and HR will pay you Zollars to redeem for Zappos swag. Each month, employees can reward a coworker with a $50 company bonus for going above and beyond. And company largesse begets acts of random kindness.
I took a picture of a particular bouquet that I liked, and I posted on Facebook, like, oh, I love flowers.
Letha Miles started in customer service 9 years ago.
The next day, there was a bouquet of flowers sitting on my desk, along with a note saying, you make us smile, so we thought we would make you smile.
Birthday balloons abound. Cubicle self-expression is de rigueur. But look, what can the business rationale be for all this? Why would Amazon pay more than $1 billion for Zappos in 2009 and then let it spend so generously for so long just to make its employees happy?
I think it's pretty hard to give great, amazing service if you're an unhappy employee.
Turns out Zappos' business is service. It started with shoes, as Amazon did with books, aims to branch out.
We've talked about one day there could be a Zappos Airlines or a Zappos Hotel that's just about the very best customer service and customer experience.
Well-known service like the 365-day free shipping return policy, managed by customer service reps who start at $14 an hour and comprise a third of all employees.
Thank you for calling Zappos. This is Sandy. How may I help you?
And above and beyond service. 2 flight attendants told me Zappos, when asked, sent pizza to an auditorium full of new JetBlue hires.
In fact, we just had our longest phone call ever, which was well over 10 hours long.
10 hours?
Yeah, and
what were they talking
bonded.
about?
I was not there, but I think they bonded.
So for you, to hear that somebody spent 10 hours on the phone with a customer bonding, that's a good thing, not a waste of time.
That's an amazing thing.
But what's the payoff?
2008 was the first year we hit $1 billion in gross merchandise sales. We're doing several times that now, and the #1 driver through all that history has been through repeat customers and word of mouth.
So Amazon has kept hands off while Zappos proselytizes its happy, weird ways, offering daily tours and advising companies that want to emulate it. Now, CEO Shea can be impish.
Rachel, do you want me to leave? Get it? Leave?
But he can also be seriously controversial. He's introduced a system called holacracy that, among other things, does away with bosses entirely. All Zappos' 1,500 employees now belong to some 500 self-governing teams called circles.
We're going to start like we do every holacracy meeting with a check-in round. Just call out your distractions, get here, get ready to process some tensions today, and share what you know with others.
I'm only distracted because I have a super long day of meetings.
I'm super distracted because the application window is open for
intern candidates again for the summer, which means that we have thousands and thousands of applicants in the span of a week, up to like 5,000.
So-called tactical meetings are run by a facilitator according to a rigid format, using holocratic lingo.
Let's move on to triage, you guys. You could just go ahead and yell those tensions out, and Rachel, as our secretary, will go ahead and capture those for you.
In the closing round, kudos for efficiency.
A ton of actions. We covered 7 items in less than a half an hour, and we have like a zillion outputs, which is really great. But with that, everyone have a great day.
Chris Peak helped with the Holacracy rollout.
I would say the best thing about this process is the commitment to action and projects and the transparency to those. I would say probably the most challenging with Zappos' culture, you introduced a really rigid process within meeting spaces.
Shay believes self-management is key to Zappos' longevity, allowing it to grow not like a top-down corporation, but a city.
Most companies, as they get bigger, they become less nimble, less innovative, less productive. Every time the size of a city doubles, innovation or productivity per resident increases by 15%. When you get more people in a relatively smaller area in a city, then you get this crossover of ideas from different creative types and entrepreneurs and businesses.
But self-organization wasn't for everyone. So 2 years ago, Shay offered a liberal severance package to those not sold on the new structure. In fact, to everyone. 18% took buyouts, hiking the firm's yearly turnover rate for 2015 to almost 30%, though there's plenty of turnover at customer service firms and plenty in Las Vegas, period. But Letha Miles is sticking with it.
The people who stayed are pretty much saying that they're willing to commit to learning it and practicing it. You know, let's still remember we're friends, we're family, and I think that helps us stay true to the process.
It felt like it took the humanity out of it, but we've worked that back into the process, I feel, and everybody's voice gets heard, which usually in the past it was just the loudest person in the room, right?
Williams points out that Zappos is now canine friendly because it was deemed safe enough to try, a key idea in Holacracy.
In the past that had been shut down multiple times, and through Holacracy we were able to push that through. I know that's not a huge deal, but it's a big deal to our employees.
But Shay thinks self-management will accomplish something much bigger, saving Zappos from the fate of most large companies.
If you look at the Fortune 500 list, which I think came out in 1955 originally, something like 85%, maybe more, are no longer on that list. The default fate for most companies is actually death. I want this company to still be around 500 years from now.
This is economics correspondent Paul Solman, still wearing my tie, reporting from Las Vegas.
Okay, so remember from my previous video in management, I talked about organizational culture, a little bit briefly on that. And what Zappo is trying to convey is what is their mission and culture? And does people that work for Zappos, do they fit in with that organizational culture? Do they believe in that organizational culture, right? If you don't have buy-in with the employees in your company, in the culture that you form for the company, then it's not going to be a good fit. Just something to consider. Here's some questions to consider based on that video. And this is a chart related to employee training and development process. Take a look at this chart in your textbook. Some concept checks for section 4. Another chart related to performance and planning and evaluation. The table related to behavior-based rating scale for performance appraisal. Section 5, questions to consider, concept checks. Section 6, concept checks. Let's take a look at this video.
I joined Gore because in my last company, I felt like I had reached the maximum of where I was going to be able to continue to grow. I had a myriad of people that I had to convince if I wanted to develop in a different area that helped me make decisions about my career. And when I got to Gore, my sponsor is my point of contact for Gore. And so what helps me about the Gore culture is that I have leaders, I have team members, and we're all interested in everybody contributing to the success at their highest potential. It made me feel that there really is a network of people behind me that is encouraging me to be successful. I'm able to be more creative in how to contribute to my teams. That's what allows me to get up and come to work every day. It's getting the product out of manufacturing, getting the product out of design, and actually into the hands of a physician where it can save someone's life. It's not just another job. It's not just another career path. It really is a vehicle for personal growth. That's huge to me. And so if you're comfortable with being a self-starter, self-motivator, but you really want to make a difference in your area of expertise or in your field, then I recommend that you come to Gore.
Okay. Let's check out Mark's story.
My name is Mark. I joined Gore in 2004. My current commitment is operations lead for the Gore turbine filter product line. I think we have a unique situation. We have a very small team, so my emphasis might be on the operations piece, but I also link over to the technical and the sales side also. And I think what I really enjoy is every day is a different challenge. The biggest change I've seen in myself is I worked the first 20 years of my career in very bureaucratic, large, top-down businesses. And it really was an adjustment to come to the Gore culture. If you're the type of person that really needs day-to-day direction and needs to have clarity about what's my job and how I need to interact and how to interact, this company's probably not for you. So the change I've seen is just how I feel about interacting with other people, the freedom to just grab onto an idea, drive solutions without having to worry about it coming from a boss. I'm really proud of the team and what we've done to really grow our business. And I really feel we have a good, tight-knit team that understands the priorities and what it takes to be successful.
Okay. So here's some questions to consider regarding Gore and Associates. Here's a table related to benefits stressed by unions and organizing campaigns. And here's something that's some common arguments against the unions. Here's the table exhibit for union organization process and election. The process for negotiating labor agreements. Now, here's what I want you to understand. Unions are not necessarily a bad thing or a bad word. Unions are there to make sure that there are safe working conditions for all the employees, right? And policies and procedures that protect the employees, as well as the management who must enforce those protections, right? Sometimes there's an oversight and the unions speak up and talk on behalf of their employees, the staff that work there, and to get things done, right? Without unions, I think that without unions, there might be a little bit of a tendency to, what's that word? A little bit of tendency to take advantage. That's my thought, right? There has to be a balance of power and a balance of structure. Unions keep the management accountable and management keep the employees accountable, and union is there to make sure and facilitate all parts of the agreement are promised and agreed upon. I hope that makes sense. This is concept check for section 7. Here is a grievance procedure. This is a typical grievance procedure. It may not apply to all grievance procedure depending on your company. You may want to look at your policies and procedures manual. And some strategies of unions and employers. What are the union strategies here on the left? What is the employer strategies on the right? It can become adversarial, but hopefully, unions and employers work amicably and not make it an adversarial process. But what it comes down to is money. That's the negotiation. It's always about money. Remember, unions and the workers want a fair livable wage, right? The cost of living is so high. So when employers ask, I want a fair wage that could cover cost of living, that is not reasonable. And remember, there's two separate goals of what an employee is and what an employer is. Employers' goals is to maximize profit for the CEO and the organization. The union or the employees, their goal is to work their best, have job opportunities and professional development, but at the same time, get paid enough to cover the cost of living and expenses. Does that make sense? Hopefully that does. If there's still a little bit of muddy point regarding what the goals of an employee versus an employer is and how union gets involved, feel free to send me an email or a Canvas message. Here's some concept check for section 8. And this is a table regarding laws that impact human resource management, right? These are some federal laws. And labor standards. Take a look at these websites, right? Google some of these laws on the federal level and take a look at some of the websites. These are to protect you, the employee, right? And the employer, the management must adhere to these rules and regulations. And Human Resources Department ensures that the corporation and employer is in compliance. This table is continued. Here's some concept checks for section 9. Remember, go through the textbook online and review the chapter outlines. Okay. This is a video. For some reason, it's not working, but take a look at the textbook and the PowerPoint for this. I will skip over and I apologize for the inconvenience. But here's some questions to consider. In section 10, here's some concept checks. Before I end this review, think about how can employee diversity give a company a competitive advantage. This question right here, how can employee diversity give a company a competitive advantage? This is a very important question. Why? Because many organizations and companies and corporations, they want to advance or set up policies for DEIA. D stands for diversity, E stands for equity, I stands for inclusiveness, and A is accessibility. Accessibility in terms of maybe employees that are colorblind and need accessibility in terms of screen readers, right? In terms of inclusiveness, everyone wants a sense of belonging within an organization. And of course, equity. Equity and equality is two different terminology. Equity is where how can we have many employees gain the same access, right? There may be different ways and different steps and different variables that block certain employees to get that access. How do we make sure that everyone has equitable access, right? And then we have the D, diversity. Diversity is very important in many organizations because It gives a competitive edge because it may give a perspective that one person had thought about because of diversity of thinking or diversity of perspective. You may want to consider that when you are trying to hire certain employees to help you run your business or your startup. All right. If you got any questions, feel free to email me or send me a chemist message. Thank you for your time.